Left out at the elementary school picnic. Left out at the middle school camp. Left out on the high school trip. I finally made it to university, and what happens? I get left out of all of humanity. My name is Ilhan, and I have always been the one nobody notices. Not hated. Not bullied. Just forgotten. People's eyes slide right off me. I'm the empty seat, the name no one remembers, the guy you swear wasn't there. I told myself I didn't need anyone. That I was like the number one, a single upright stroke that could stand on its own. That's what I told myself. And then one day the buses stopped coming. The streets went silent. Every single human being on earth vanished, my parents, my classmates, strangers, all of them gone. Every last person on the planet was teleported away to other worlds. Except me. This is the story of the man the whole world forgot. And how being forgotten made me the strongest thing this planet has ever produced. Here's what happened. A being calling itself God made contact with Earth. Mana, a higher energy that Earth had never known, was about to flood into our world. And when mana arrives, animals adapt to it far faster than humans do. They mutate. They become monsters. And a world that gets flooded with mana without preparation gets wiped out. Dozens of worlds had already died this way. So God's solution was simple: evacuate all of humanity to other, safer worlds, let them train and adapt to mana for 10 years, and then send them back to reclaim Earth when the disaster, the great cataclysm, arrives. Every human was accounted for. Every single one. Except my name never showed up on God's list. Because I was born with a passive ability so absolute that even God's eyes slid right off me, the same way everyone's always had. A skill called concealment. The world's most powerful loner ability. It quite literally erased me from the awareness of a god. So while all of humanity got shipped off to magical training worlds, I was left standing alone on an empty Earth, having a complete breakdown at a bus stop that would never see another bus. But God, feeling a flicker of pity for the one person he'd overlooked, threw me a bone. He sent an angel named Lita to keep me company and help me train. He froze Earth's time so I wouldn't age. And he promised me bonus stats when the great cataclysm finally came. 10 years, they said. Just survive and train for 10 years, and everyone will come back. 10 years. That's what they promised. So I started training. If I was the only human who'd be on Earth when the monsters came, then I had to be ready to fight them alone, with no mana, using nothing but my own body in my own hands. And here's the cruel part of my situation: I couldn't touch mana yet at all. Everyone else was off in magical worlds soaking in it, leveling up the easy way. I had nothing but raw human flesh and bone and whatever I could teach myself. So that's exactly what I trained: the body. I pushed past the point where muscles tear, past the point where a normal man collapses, and then past that, over and over, until my physical stats climbed to numbers a human being was never supposed to reach. Lita taught me combat, and I drilled every movement until it stopped being technique and became instinct, until my body would kill a threat before my mind had even finished registering it. But throwing fists at empty air gets you only so far. I needed weapons. So I taught myself to forge. Blacksmithing didn't stay a hobby for long, it became almost a religion to me. I learned to heat and fold and hammer metal until a blade came out the other side, then learned to make that blade better, and better, and better. I learned dismantling too, how to take apart the body of a monster and harvest every usable scrap, every core, every hide, because when the cataclysm came, monster parts would be the only crafting materials I'd have. I built an entire life out of preparation. Wake, train the body until it screamed, forge until my hands were raw, study until my eyes burned, sleep, repeat. Day after day after day, in a world with no other living soul in it, with only an angel who visited now and then to remind me I was still real. And then 10 years passed. And nobody came back. Lita was horrified. I was, by then, strangely calm. Because if humanity wasn't coming back yet, then that just meant I had more time to prepare. So I kept going. I decided I would learn everything. Every martial art. Every craft. I set myself a quest that sounds insane when you say it out loud, I would read every book in the world. Every language humanity had ever written in, I taught myself, just so I could read those books. When you have infinite time and no one to talk to, knowledge becomes the only thing that keeps you from going mad. 10 years became 50. I stopped counting after 50, that's the honest truth. I just stopped, because counting the years when no one is coming only makes the silence louder. 50 became 100. 100 became 500. And somewhere in there, something in me changed for good. A normal person, locked alone in an empty world for centuries, breaks. Goes mad. I didn't, and the only reason I didn't was that I refused to let the time be wasted. Every empty hour became another skill. Every silent year became another book, another language, another technique. Solitude that would have destroyed anyone else, I turned into fuel. Lita could only visit now and then, and every single separation from her cut deeper than the last, because she was the one living thing in all of existence that remembered I was there. When she left, the whole planet went quiet again. When she came back, it was like being reminded I was still a person and not just a ghost haunting a dead world. Slowly, without either of us admitting it, she became the center of my entire life. By the end, 1,000 years had passed. 1,000 years alone on a frozen, empty Earth. Later, they would call it the forgotten millennium. Try to actually imagine that, not 10 years, not 100, a full 1,000 years with essentially no human contact, watching the same silent sky, forging in the same silent workshop. I came out the other side of it as something that only looked human on the surface. Calm to the point of cold. Impossible to rattle. Carrying 1,000 years of skill and knowledge in a body that never aged a day past the morning everyone disappeared. And when it was finally over, when the millennium ended, I was forced to be separated from Lita. And standing there in that silence, I made a vow. I swore I would climb high enough, become a high enough existence, that I would find my way back to her and never be left behind by anyone or anything ever again. That vow became the engine of everything that came after. Not power for its own sake. Not glory. Just the refusal to ever be the forgotten one again. 1,000 years of training. And for everyone else? Only 10 years had passed in their worlds. Then, finally, they came back. Billions of humans returned to Earth all at once, and to them, they were the heroes. They'd spent a decade in magical worlds learning to wield mana. They came home glowing with power, certain they were the strongest beings the planet had ever seen, ready to save the Earth they remembered. Level 10, level 20 hunters, strutting around like gods. And there in the corner, unnoticed as always, stood a man they'd never met, who'd been grinding for 1,000 years while they took a 10-year vacation. A man with no mana at all, but with a body and skill set that made their power look like a child's toy. They didn't even see me at first. Of course they didn't. My concealment was stronger than ever. I got to walk among the returnees completely invisible, watching them, sizing them up, while they had no idea the real strongest human on Earth was standing right next to them. And then the great cataclysm hit. Mana flooded the world all at once. The ordinary animals that had been sitting quietly this whole time, the strays, the birds, the insects, the things in the forests and the oceans, drank in that mana and mutated in moments into monsters. Gates to other dimensions tore open across the planet, spilling out creatures that had no business existing on Earth. Cities that had stood empty for 1,000 years of frozen time suddenly became war zones. And the returnees, for all their swagger, started dying. This is the part they never saw coming. They'd trained for 10 years in worlds that were carefully balanced for human survival. They came home expecting a fair fight. But Earth's cataclysm didn't care about fair. The monsters here were stronger, hungrier, and more numerous than anything their tutorial worlds had prepared them for. Level 10 heroes who'd been strutting around like gods a week earlier were being torn apart in the streets. The confidence drained out of humanity fast. That's when my legend actually begins. I moved through the chaos like a ghost. My concealment, the ability that had cursed me with a lifetime of being ignored, had become the single most terrifying combat skill on the planet. Monsters couldn't sense me coming. Human hunters couldn't track me. I could stand in the middle of a battlefield and no one would register I was there until the enemy in front of them simply fell dead. I struck from absolutely anywhere and vanished before anyone understood what had happened. Think about what that means in a fight. The most dangerous thing about any predator is being seen, giving your target time to brace, to counter, to run. I had removed that variable entirely. A monster the size of a house would be mid-roar 1 second and collapsing with a hole punched through its heart the next, and it would die without ever knowing what killed it. I wasn't stronger than everything I fought, not at first. But I never had to be, because nothing I fought ever got a turn. Nobody knew who was saving them. They just knew that, impossibly, monsters kept dying in droves, and a figure in black kept appearing and disappearing faster than the eye could follow. So the survivors did what people always do, they made up names for the mystery. The man in black, for how fast the interventions came. Then Susanu. And eventually, as the body count of slain monsters climbed past anything that made sense, Death God. The weapons were the part that really set me apart, and this is where 1,000 years of boring grinding paid off in a way no one else could copy. Every other hunter on Earth relied on whatever skills the training worlds had handed them. Borrowed power. Gifts they didn't fully understand. I built everything I used with my own 2 hands. A millennium at the forge meant I could craft weapons and armor no one on this planet had ever seen or could ever reproduce. I understood metal and mana materials on a level that would take a normal smith 100 lifetimes to reach. My signature weapon says everything about how I fight. A pile bunker, a brutal, piston-driven spear that doesn't slash or stab so much as detonate forward, driving a spike through a target with enough force to punch a clean hole through a monster the size of a building. It's not elegant. It's not flashy. It's the weapon of a man who spent 1,000 years deciding exactly how he wanted to kill things and then built the perfect tool to do it. Pair that with concealment and unseen strike, delivered with a weapon that ends anything in one blow, and you start to understand why they called me Death God. And because I could dismantle every monster I killed and forge its remains into something new, I only got stronger with every single fight. Every kill was raw material. Every battle fed the next weapon, the next piece of armor, the next upgrade. While the returnees burned through the fixed power they'd been given, I was an engine that turned corpses into equipment and equipment into more corpses. There was no ceiling to that loop. But here's the thing the story never lets you forget, I wasn't invincible from the start. 1,000 years is a long time, but there's a ceiling to how strong a human without mana can get. When the cataclysm came and mana finally entered my own body, I had to start climbing all over again, except now I had a millennium of skill and knowledge stacked underneath me. So every fight was real. Every new enemy could genuinely hurt me. I wasn't a god stomping ants. I was a man who'd earned an absurd head start and still had to fight for every single step. As I climbed, the world slowly discovered me. Earthlings came to respect the mysterious death god more than their own governments. People abandoned the old political powers just to align themselves with me. Everything connected to my name became legendary, the mansion that drew monsters to it so I could hunt them, the workshop that produced weapons no one else could dream of, even, absurdly, a dessert shop, because in 1,000 years you pick up strange hobbies. And I was never truly alone anymore. The returnees I'd once watched from the shadows became comrades. Powerful women were drawn to me, the angel Lita chief among them, the one being who'd stayed with me through the forgotten millennium, though I'll be honest, after 1,000 years of solitude, I was hopelessly, comically bad at understanding anyone's feelings for me. I could see through a fake smile or a political lie in an instant. But genuine, honest affection aimed at me? That was the one thing that could still knock me completely off balance. The man who couldn't be fooled by anyone was totally defenseless against being sincerely loved. There was a mentor figure too, a ruthless, terrifying presence when she first appeared, who over time became one of my greatest allies and, in a sense, the greatest weapon of all. The lonely man who'd sworn he needed no one slowly, without quite noticing, built himself a family. But the deeper I climbed, the more the truth of the world peeled itself open, and it turned out to be so much bigger than monsters and gates. Heaven itself, the angels, the God who'd overlooked me, was not the simple benevolent higher power it pretended to be. Behind the comforting story of "we evacuated you to keep you safe" was something far colder and far more political. The universe, I learned, is a hierarchy. At the bottom, ordinary beings like the humans returning to Earth. Above them, higher existences, transcenders, beings who had climbed past mortal limits into something closer to gods. And above even them, powers waging a war that had been going on for longer than Earth had existed, scheming and maneuvering across countless worlds and timelines. Earth wasn't a precious planet being lovingly protected. Earth was one more square on an enormous board, one more resource in a game between beings who saw entire worlds as playing pieces. And that reframed everything. The great cataclysm, the mana, the dozens of worlds that had already died, none of it was a natural disaster. It was the fallout of that war, spilling downward into the mortal plane. The angels who'd smiled and praised me for training so well were players in something I couldn't yet see the shape of. The more I understood, the more I realized that saving Earth from monsters was only the first floor of a building that went up further than I could imagine. And my own origins were tangled up in it. The reason I'd been born with an ability that could hide me from a god that was no accident either. I learned, eventually, that my own bloodline reached far higher than any ordinary humans. The forgotten loner was never quite as ordinary as the world assumed. The truth of who my family really was reframed everything. I hadn't just been overlooked by God. In a way, I'd been hidden. Protected. Prepared for exactly this. So I kept climbing. Not for revenge, not really. Not even just to protect Earth, though I did that too, again and again. I climbed for the vow I'd made in the silence at the end of the forgotten millennium, to become a high enough existence to stand beside the ones I loved and never be separated from them again. To transcend. To stop being a human who could be left behind, and become something that no god could ever overlook or ship off or forget. The forgotten university student who cried at an empty bus stop became the death god of Earth. And the death god became something higher still, a transcender, climbing toward the very top of the cosmic order the angels had tried to keep him beneath. And that's the strange, beautiful joke at the heart of this whole story. Everyone else got sent away to train in comfort, and came back thinking they were special. I got left behind, alone, forgotten, in a world of frozen time, the worst fate God could have handed anyone. And it turned out to be the greatest gift imaginable. 1,000 years no one else got. A head start no one else could match. Being forgotten by the entire universe was the exact thing that let me surpass it. They all came home as returnees. I was the one who never left. And in the end, the man everyone forgot became the one none of them could ever forget again. That's the story of you, Ilhan. The last man on Earth. The death god. The one who was left behind and climbed higher than everyone who left him.
Yet see the shape of. The more I understood, the more I realized that saving Earth from monsters was only the first floor of a building that went up further than I could imagine. And my own origins were tangled up in it. The reason I'd been born with an ability that could hide me from a god, that was no accident either. I learned, eventually, that my own bloodline reached far higher than any ordinary humans. The forgotten loner was never quite as ordinary as the world assumed. The truth of who my family really was reframed everything. I hadn't just been overlooked by a god. In a way, it'd been hidden. Protected. Prepared for exactly this. So I kept climbing. Not for revenge, not really. Not even just to protect Earth, though I did that too, again and again. I climbed for the wait mate in the silence at the end of the forgotten millennium, to become a high enough existence to stand beside the ones I loved and never be separated from them again. To transcend. To stop being a human who could be left behind, and become something that no god could ever overlook or ship off or forget. The forgotten university student who cried at an empty bus stop became the death god of Earth. And the death god became something higher still, a transcender, climbing towards the very top of the cosmic order the angels had tried to keep him beneath. And that's the strong, beautiful joke at the heart of this whole story. Everyone else got sent through to train in comfort, and came back thinking they were special. I got left behind, alone, forgotten, in a world of frozen time, the worst fate God could have handed anyone. And it turned out to be the greatest gift imaginably. 8,000 years no one else got. A head start no one else could match. Being forgotten by the entire universe was the exact thing that let me surpass it. They all came home as returnees. I was the one who never left. And in the end, the man everyone forgot became the one none of them could ever forget again. That's the story of Ilhan, the last man on earth. The death god.